November 4th, 2002. 17 years ago, Insomniac Games put out a fun little game called Ratchet and Clank. A game, now 17 years later, is 10 mainline games deep, plus 2 spin-offs by a different studio, a collection, a reimagining reboot, 2 mobile games, and a movie. And the now former president of Sony Worldwide Studios, Sean Layden, is telling us this franchise is still vital for the future? What? You know, it's rare for a franchise to last this long and have so many sequels. A few examples, excluding spin-offs, include Resident Evil at 7 sequels, both Dragon Quest and Mega Man at 11, and Pokemon and Final Fantasy at 15. How has this little furry dude and his robot companion lasted this long to stand up against these long and beloved franchises in terms of sequels? Well, to celebrate this anniversary, let's take a look back at exactly how Insomniac has managed to keep this up for so long, and where we might see it go. So first of all, Insomniac actually did a GDC talk in 2018, which I'll link below, basically about the same thing, but it's an hour long, so this will kind of be a condensed version of that while also hitting on some other points and observations that they didn't mention. Now, I also did just put out a video celebrating the decade anniversary of A Crack in Time. Click the iCard in the top right, or link in the description, and briefly went over most of the games, but today we'll take a deeper dive into the PS2 era, the Future Trilogy, the follow-up PS3 titles, the PS4 reimagining, and the future of the franchise. How did we make it this far? Warning, spoilers. So way back in 2000, Insomniac had just wrapped up their hit trilogy, Spyro the Dragon, and wanted to move on to something bigger for the PS2, Ratchet and Clank. A series birthed from one idea, an alien that travels from planet to planet collecting weapons and gadgets. Every level was on a different planet, and on each planet you would unlock a new weapon from the weapons vendor, brought to you by Gadgetron. You could also find a couple on alternative routes, as well as the gadgets. You'd run through a linear level, fighting off enemies with your arsenal, traversing through the planets, and meeting iconic characters, most notably Captain Quark, a character best described as Homer Simpson meets Captain Kirk. It was an incredible platformer with a shooting element. 1 year later, they came out with a sequel, Going Commando. With high expectations for a sequel, they fully delivered, keeping the level of platforming where it was while doubling down on the gunplay. Controls were tighter, weapons can now be upgraded, giving you more incentive to use all your weapons instead of just using your favorite. They added arenas to really test your gunplay skills and give you a great chance to level up those weapons and get better at using them. And as you progressed, you could also unlock newer and better sets of armor to protect you from the increasing challenge of enemies. And you could also strafe now, thank God. The next year around, in 2004, with Up Your Arsenal, they doubled down on everything they hit in Going Commando. They now made a full, complete shift from a platformer with shooting to a shooter with platforming, as they've added things like full circle strafing and using an R1 trigger. Along with the major success of this game, they fully realized the DNA of a Ratchet and Clank game. That list includes a buddy story with heart, imaginative and strategic weapons, planetary exploration, gadgets, including Captain Quark, stylized rich detail and vibrant visuals, a Douglas Adams-inspired humor, and a balance of shooting with platforming. Keeping true to this formula was keeping true to what made the franchise unique and loved in the first place. It was key to keeping players and fans engaged and coming back. With this, they led the franchise through years to come. So Insomniac now had a solid trilogy of games, each one better than the last, arguably, and all hitting all of those points that led to a great Ratchet and Clank game. Now around this time, we started to see other console mascots fade away. Insomniac needed a new IP or to make some changes to the one they loved for the fans. Taking inspiration from Halo, Ratchet Deadlocked was born. Now, this was a pretty significant change. Out of all the previously mentioned points, only the gadgets and humor made this a Ratchet and Clank game. It was a fantastic and fun game, however, not a great Ratchet and Clank game. Kinda how people would say Fallout 4 was a good game, but not a good Fallout game. This is when they realized they needed to consistently focus on the core brand of Ratchet without straying too far from it. Now, the PlayStation 3 was on the horizon. Insomniac was working on a launch title, a new IP, Resistance: Fall of Man. Resistance gave them a lot of insight for how to bring Ratchet over to the next gen. This was a new era for Ratchet and Clank. How could they keep Ratchet's DNA but also bring something new to the table? Well, first of all, they hired a writer, TJ Fixman. After gathering all the bits of lore from the previous games, they came up with this amazing trilogy of games, the Future Trilogy. Now there are some inconsistencies, Angela, but they did their best, and it's a fantastic story nonetheless. And this starts with Ratchet and Clank Future: Tools of Destruction. Now, watching this GDC talk, I actually learned that they had way more planned for this game. Procedural worlds, multiplayer, space exploration, spherical worlds, races. Wow, darn. You win again, technology. But even without those features, the game is fantastic. It holds true to Ratchet's DNA checklist, but on a bigger scale, unlike anything before, especially with the story. At the end of the game, however, there was a pretty major cliffhanger, and apparently they regret it, and apparently fans didn't like it very much either. But personally, I didn't think it was that bad. I just thought it was a sick cliffhanger, but what do I know about storytelling? Anyways, they needed to make amends. The next game was gonna take a bit longer to make, 2 years, so they put out a smaller filler game in the meantime, Quest for Booty. Now this didn't quite hit all the points of Ratchet's DNA checklist, but it was still a fine game, gave them an opportunity to experiment with new ideas like an open hub world, a wrench tether, things like that. It was just a small game to prep for the peak of the franchise, 2009's A Crack in Time. Now this game, oh man, this hits every point perfectly. Once again, I have a much more in-depth video about this particular game linked below. All you need to know is that this one was the peak. Every point nailed to the greatest extent. And you know, this was actually supposed to be the last Ratchet and Clank game, but it just did too darn well. The fans wanted more, and so did Sony. Now we're getting into the real inspiration behind this video. See, it was when they started this post-future era, we started to see a bit of a decline as Insomniac had not originally planned to go beyond this point. So what do they do now? More of the same? Well, I'm sure there's people out there that would be happy with that, me included. They started to worry about franchise fatigue at this point, as critics were starting to suggest the same. So how do they change Ratchet this time? Well, they decided to take inspiration from a newer genre that was getting popularized by games like Little Big Planet and Castle Crashers, online and co-op. Up Your Arsenal and Deadlocked both had an online matchmaking, and Deadlock had a co-op option, but this time it was co-op all the way. After 2 years of waiting, in 2011, it was all for one. But as you can see, it wasn't Ratchet and Clank. They even decided to target a younger audience this time. Fans weren't happy. So, a year later, they did it again. Full Frontal Assault, a tower defense game. Now, this was about as far from Ratchet and Clank as they could get. Co-op modes and online matchmaking, it was all there. But at least they were back to classic gunplay, Quark was there, visuals and some humor was mixed in, but that's about it, and for what was there, it was all about as weak as it's been. And I don't mean to step on it too much, I mean it was a really great tower defense game. But now after another year, it was time to go back to the roots. It was time to go into the Nexus. Bringing back everything you love about Ratchet and Clank. For about 6 hours. Yeah, that was it. It was a fantastic game, with everything you love. Just a bit cut short. But you know what happened before this game even happened? The announcement for the Ratchet and Clank movie. What? This blew my mind back in the day. I was off the wall. And around when it was supposed to come out in 2015, we were hit with the announcement for a new game on the PS4. Oh my god, a reimagining of the first game, based on the movie, which was based on the original first game. Now both of these things came out in 2016 alongside each other, 3 years after Into the Nexus. And well, the movie? Nah, not so great. But the game? Fantastic. Well, depending on who you ask. Point being, after a 3-year break from Ratchet and Clank, Insomniac made their mark once again that the franchise was still relevant, and really warranting another sequel. And after the major success of their other game, Marvel's Spider-Man, Sony purchased Insomniac. After the big news, there was an interview with Sean Layden, the now former president of Worldwide Studios. In that interview, he said Ratchet and Clank is vital for the present and future, which further confirms the call for a new game. Now, if you want to know more about what a new Ratchet and Clank game might be, I highly suggest you watch my other video, linked in the top right up there. You can pull that card out, or linked below. I talk about what the game might be, how we know it's happening, and when it'll probably be announced and released, so highly suggest you check that out if you want to, so go do that after this is over. So anyways, that's the history. But now I want to take a step back and look at this. How did this happen? Well, the first 3 games were clearly classics. Insomniac could have followed suit with franchises like Sly Cooper and Jak and Daxter and just dropped off after 3 games and move on. And, well, Insomniac did both. They moved on to things like Resistance, Fuse, Sunset Overdrive, but they kept Ratchet going strong. They had passion for it, and they took risks to keep it from getting boring. They took inspiration from other fantastic games and genres. Then we got another fantastic trilogy. 2 amazing trilogies? You know how rare that is? What a blessing. What a time to be a Ratchet and Clank fan. And then, just when they thought it was over, they must have poured too much passion into their last project because the fans just wanted more. And it was at that point we hit a bit of a low for the series, but again, I want to reiterate, they're both really great games for what they are. They just don't hit the core elements of Ratchet and Clank that make it a Ratchet and Clank game. But either way, you know what? This is the main point I wanted to make in this video. I'm glad we got those games. I'm glad the series went where it went. I'm glad everything that exists, because without all of this, the series wouldn't be where it's at now. They would have gotten too much hate from critics, it could have died out, but we got something to keep it alive and fresh, for better or for worse. And without those games, they wouldn't have gotten the feedback that led them to make Into the Nexus, which means the series would have stopped in 2009 with A Crack in Time, and then the movie might not have happened, which means the PS4 game wouldn't have happened, which means there wouldn't be a new generation being introduced to the series, which wouldn't make the PS4 title the fastest selling Ratchet and Clank game to date, which has now led Sean Layden to say that they see Ratchet and Clank in our future. See what I mean? Now, I'm sure there's people out there that will disagree with this butterfly effect. We don't know what could have happened under whatever circumstances, but point is, I'm glad that we're here, because I'm excited for the future. And I know Insomniac has passion for Ratchet. They tell us that all the time, and we wouldn't be here without that passion. So, thank you, Insomniac. Thank you for sharing your passion with us. Thank you for an amazing 17 years, and hopefully many more to come. Hey, huge thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for much more of this content, more essay and discussion videos to come, so please subscribe so you don't miss it. I know there's people out there that enjoy any Ratchet and Clank content like this, myself included, so please subscribe so you see what's to come. And sorry this is a bit late for being up on the actual anniversary. It was pretty rough to write, record, and edit 2 essay videos within a week of each other while also working a full-time job and getting food poisoning. So please do like this video, subscribe, and comment your favorite game or something. I'd love to hear from you. I love to talk about this all the time. Tell me below, what did you think about this video? Why do you think the series has lasted so long personally? Let me know. Thanks again, everyone. Love you all. I'll see you soon. Peace.